Why is it so easy to overtrain plyos?
Because Plyo never feels that hard. It's fun, like leaping about.
Unless you're trying to do depth jumps off a roof. If he was Russian, he would not have screamed. No days training in Russia. Preach! Testify!
Here are some of the reasons why it's so easy to overtrain Plyo. Firstly, it's because there are at least 3 factors to account for: physical stress, metabolic stress, and neural stress. People who train are very practiced at recognizing physical stress, but Plyo tends to hit the tendons more than the muscles. This means that a large part of the physical stress is undetectable for 24 hours after the session. This delayed tendon soreness and inflammation makes it harder to plan what to do after Plyo. And often, people are training again when they haven't even begun the recovery from the previous day yet.
So I'm getting hurt because I'm significantly compromised, but I don't realize it. Who knew?
Secondly, when there's a metabolic stress in Plyo, it tends to go hand in hand with bad biomechanics. You see, it's not easy to create the desired metabolic stress on the heart and lungs and the muscle fatigue on the muscles from Plyo before you've gone and hit the tendons and smashed them to pieces. People push hard, but when they finally get tired enough to create the metabolic stress, technique has gone the way of the T-Rex. And Plyo requires the technique of a ballerina, not a brontosaurus. Thirdly, people are very bad at assessing neural stress. They confuse it with just not getting it, or making individual mistakes, or a temporary loss of coordination.
Yeah, it also manifests in an inability, can't speak properly.
The problem is that these concepts can all be misinterpreted. Like, are you not getting it because you've overcooked it, or because you haven't done enough practice? And both those possibilities are on opposite ends of the spectrum. If you keep making the same mistakes, is that because you're still learning and experimenting, or is it because you've overdone it? If you struggle with coordination, is that a sign to stop, take a break and resume later, or push on because you haven't put in enough hours yet to master it? A good definition of pseudoscience is that whatever the result, a pseudoscientist worth his salt can interpret it to suit his theory. For example, if you've got low self-confidence, it can be put down to not having a father figure role model or having an overbearing one. Either way. And the great thing for the diagnoser is that very few people consider themselves to have just the right amount, so you've normally got a 50-50 chance of being right. So predict away. You're normally on pretty solid ground. It's the same for Plyo.
So any symptom that I get in session can either be put down to not doing enough practice to get mastery, or doing too much in that one particular session. And frogs get this right 100% of the time? Well, I guess that's why Kermit's the head of the Muppets.
And that is the #1 reason why people overtrain Plyo. Now, it's great for the coach who has the "I told you so" mindset, but not so great for the athletes.
Sucks to be you.
So, is it possible to tell the difference? Well, you can, but you have to look elsewhere. Try things like pupil dilation, sleepiness, and positivity levels. If your pupils are dilated, if you feel sluggish or zoned out, or you start getting those negative voices, it's time to hit the showers. But you can guess, this is not an exact science, so it's just as easy to misread. And I guess if you wanted to get all tech about it, you could probably look at grip strength too. You'd set a baseline at the beginning of the session, and then just monitor it between the sets. Now, I do think it's possible to do it much more objectively, but you need to take a very long-term view on it. So you'd give yourself a number of chances in the session to get it right, like maybe 10 or 12. That's it. You'd have to start very conservatively, then measure exactly how long it took to recover in days, and then increase the load by 10% each session. Now, this means that you're leaning very heavily on the training plan and on forward planning. But don't think that this is the holy grail, because this can also lead to overtraining. When folks write it down beforehand, they become more concerned with writing the plan and becoming the prince of prediction for what and when they're going to do it. They think it's all about how many repeats in the training cycle, rather than realizing that it's about focusing on how long it takes to recover after the session is done. So they get OCD about the number of attempts, rather than watching hard on how long it takes to recover after the session.
Yeah, I did 11 reps of alternate hops, with 67 seconds of skipping, complexed with 2 rounds of depth jumps at, was it 32 centimetres, ankles locked. I did that 7 times 3 with 39 seconds recovery.
Okay, so how long did all that take to supercompensate from?
Super what? Super compound what? What, like a compo claim? What insurance company's going to pay me to do Plyo? They better have a hell of an underwriter. Shock jumps!
But here's another perspective on Plyo. Basically, the performance of the rep is everything. The number of reps is there to provide a protection against doing too much. It's not really there to create a stimulus. Think of it like a top limit, not a minimum amount. Now, volume is going to create stimulus, but that's not its purpose.
Ah, so volume is just chances to win. Like buying 87 £1 raffle tickets so you can win a stuffed toy and a box of biscuits.
The thing that needs to be monitored very carefully is exactly how long it takes to recover from the session. That's what you track over time, and that's what you're trying to improve. You're trying to build your neural capacity. It's better to do 5 amazing attempts where you achieve the aim than to do 20 attempts with 15 that aren't fit for purpose. You see, it's not the Gladwell 10,000 hours issue. It's more the 10,000 perfect attempts issue. Now, low-level Plyo can be done much more than high-level Plyo, but how much more depends on you. But more importantly, it depends on what else you're doing in your training. Now, athletes specifically tend to struggle with this more because they're trying to make gains on various different fronts simultaneously. I know that there are people in bodybuilding who think that overtraining is a bit of a myth, but this is because bodybuilding is predominantly metabolic and only a very small amount neural. And it's the neural overtraining that blows you. Also, weight is easier to judge the physical, metabolic and neural strain on, especially when it's heavy, because you get tired quickly and it's easier to judge the strain. But plyo fatigue is harder to detect because, well, it doesn't come wrapped up in that nice recognizable package, and the strain never seems too strenuous.
Yeah, until they strain something.
Oh, it hurts. Can't walk. Take me to the hospital.
Finish the session.
Exactly. I mean, doing sets of 10 hurdle hops doesn't seem that hard, but the neural drain can be pretty high. And sports people tend to just mix and match weights and plyos, just throwing them together, but seeing them as different things without realizing that they're both drawing from the same well.
Ah, it's like Bob Marley said. Here it is, the bucket, I go a well. One day the bottom I go drop out. One day the bottom I go drop out. And I say...
People think that they're not CNS fatigued because they can do the session. In weights, you get instant feedback in warm-up. The bar feels heavier, your grip's not as strong. But in plyo, you don't get the same cues to warn you. Often, you can do it. You just don't do it as well. Now, if there's a force plate measuring your rate of force development and giving you touch time readings, then it becomes easy. Like if you normally hit 1,000 watts in 0.08 of a second, and today you're doing 900 watts in 0.09, you know the only hopping you need to do is back in the car and get yourself home. But tech hasn't caught up. Or it has, but it's just difficult to get your hands on. So, you're left with the old-fashioned methods.
So how do you feel?
Which is subjective and error-prone. Especially as athletes notoriously ignore pain and performance to get their good vibes from just completing their session.
Yep, tick that box. And if I die before I wake, well, at least I won't have muscle ache.
And using feel requires sensors and sense to interpret the feelings. Basically, the sensors in your body and the sense that's in your brain to interpret it. And everyone knows. Most self-respecting athletes carefully fold up their common sense and leave it in their kit bags once the session starts.
Yeah, of course. So as not to damage it.
And even worse than that, if you're running a whole load of faulty paradigms and you've got a stack of wrong-mindedness, the chances of you interpreting your own sensual data correctly is going to be lower than the Mariana Trench. So if you're running a no pain, no gain paradigm, or some sort of airy-fairy nonsense with auras, dimensions and chakras, then you're probably going to abuse the power of Plyo like a psychiatrist hitting on a hot vulnerable patient. So here are 2 revelations that just might save you. 1. You completing the session doesn't make you better. How you complete the session makes you better. It's like reading a book for class. It's only important how much you retain. If you're doing Plyo like you're just reading a book and turning the pages but nothing's going in, you're not engaged. And Plyo only works if you're engaged. 2. You will get more benefit from doing easy Plyo with the touch time of a springbok than you will do from...
You better jump, Nikki. What?
Oh dears. Maybe you're Russian.
I hope this helps. Bust me a thumbs up, because let me tell you something. Have your say in the comments, babe. And watch that Rocky 3 video. It's packed full of Plyo. All about the Plyo.
Yeah, that's the one where he box jumps clean over Mr. T, right? Rocky jumps, Rocky jumps.
If you like my vibe, please subscribe.